Hello! So today we are going to learn some more maths, and I'm at the water tray, and this week we have learnt about capacity. Today we're going to be talking about weight and comparing different weights. We have got some key vocabulary to learn, and we're going to talk about heavy and light, heaviest and lightest, and we're going to talk about how we compare those as well. So firstly, I'm going to start by using my hands. Children learn really well from having a go at touching and feeling before we use the scales. First, I'm going to have a look at all the objects here, and I'm going to choose, or maybe you'd like to ask your children to choose which one they think might be the heaviest out of these. So they're making that estimation just from looking. And I'm going to go for a pebble, and I'm going to think, oh, is it heavy or is it light? And they might say it's light because in comparison to other heavy objects it is. So I would be asking which one is the heaviest out of all of the items on the table. And then I might choose, a shell, and I go, which one do I think is heavy or light? And your children should be able to say to you which one is the heaviest from holding. Then when they've decided, I would talk about checking whether they're right by using the balance scales. And before I pop the items into the balance scales, I would be asking to the children what they think will happen when I put one shell in here and one pebble in here. What will happen to the scales? Are they going to go down and up or stay the same? If they say, oh, the pebble will go down, I would be asking questions about why they think that and encouraging the language like heaviest and lightest. So I'm going to pop my shell in this one and my pebble in here, and then they can visually see that when the pebble is placed into the second tub, the pebble is heavier because the scales move down and the lightest object is up high. And this one I've chosen is quite an obvious up and down, light, heavy and lighter. It's not always as obvious as that, so you can move on for a challenge to the next one. So it gets a little trickier when items look the same or weigh the same. So sometimes it's quite hard when you're holding them to tell which one is lighter and which one is heavier. And I'd have that conversation. They could weigh the same, or they might be equal because they're familiar with equal meaning the same. So going over to the balance scales, I'm going to have a double check once you've had that conversation and pop both shells into my scales to see. Now, this is an interesting one because I genuinely felt that they weighed the same in my hands, but having a look what's happened. One of the shells is heavier than the other, and I know this because this scale is lower and this scale is higher. So this shell must be the lightest and this shell must be the heaviest. There's lots of opportunity there to get that language in and have those conversations and talk about how they might have felt the same in your hand, but when you have a look on the scale, they're actually not. So items that are the same, like they are both shells, they don't necessarily weigh the same. So this is a lovely opportunity to have that discussion and explore, and the child to have that experience by looking for themselves, and you just facilitating that by asking questions and having a look that way. So when discussing weight, sometimes children will look at a big item, like a pine cone, and they might think that it weighs more than a pebble, which is smaller. So it's addressing that misunderstanding that it's not always the case. When I hold these in my hand, I can physically feel that the pebble is heavier, but from looking at them, I might not feel like that. If I'm a child, I might think that this item is heavier. So it's addressing that and having lots of conversations around that, and talking about maybe exploring in the balance scales by popping the pine cone in there and the pebble in here, and talking about what happens. This one is smaller, but hang on, it's heavier as well, and having that conversation with your child. Another misconception might be quantity with weight. So I might think that 2 shells, there's 2 of these and only 1 pebble. So I might think that the 2 shells, because there's more, weigh more, they're heavier than the pebbles. So it's talking about having a look and exploring seeing what happens if I take one away and add one. And you might even go as far as, I'm going to use some different objects for this, but using objects that are the same. And you might even pop 2 in here and 2 in there and seeing if they are equal, and adding and taking away more to talk about which one is lighter and which one is heavier, just by looking at different numbers of the same item. That's another conversation. That's probably a bit more of a challenge, talking about quantity and weight. The key concept here is that they understand that language of heavy, light, heaviest and lightest, and also talking about items that weigh the same, that they are equal. Have lots of fun with this. You don't have to use water. I'm at the water tray. You could use water to use if you don't have many objects, but I'm sure you've got things lying around the house that you can use. You can do it at the beach in the sand, finding things on your walk. There's lots of different ways to be creative with this, and the more creative, the more engaging it is for your child. So have lots of fun, and we'd love to see what you're up to with it by posting on Tapestry, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye.